November 20th, 1943. Wait 47 hours. 700 yards off Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The Higgins boat lurches to a stop, not a gradual slowing. A sudden grinding halt as the flat bottom strikes coral. The engine whines. The propeller churns water. The boat does not move. Lieutenant William Dean Hawkins stands at the ramp. Behind him, 34 Marines grip their rifles and stare at his back. Hawkins is 29 years old, a platoon leader in the 2nd Marines. He has studied the landing plan for 6 weeks. The plan says the boats will reach the beach. The boats will lower their ramps. The Marines will step onto sand. Hawkins looks over the side of the boat. Water, 2 feet deep, maybe less. Between the boat and the beach, 700 yards of shallow lagoon. No cover, no concealment, just water and coral and open space. On the beach, Japanese machine guns open fire. The sound is distinct even over the diesel engine. A ripping noise, continuous. Tracers arc across the water. Bullets punch into the sides of the Higgins boats. Men duck instinctively. The coxswain yells at Hawkins. He cannot get closer. The reef is too shallow. The boat is stuck. Hawkins turns to his platoon. He does not need to give a speech. Every man understands. They are going to walk. He drops the ramp, steps into the water. His boots touch coral. Water reaches his waist. He starts walking toward the beach. His platoon follows. The machine guns find them immediately. 6 weeks earlier, October 12th, 1943, Pearl Harbor. Rear Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner sits at the head of a conference table covered with maps and aerial photographs. Turner commands the 5th Amphibious Force. He has put more American troops ashore under Japanese fire than any officer alive. Guadalcanal, Tulagi, New Georgia. He knows how to land Marines on hostile beaches. The maps show Tarawa Atoll, a coral ring in the Central Pacific. Inside the ring, a lagoon. Inside the lagoon, a tiny island called Betio, 2 miles long, 800 yards wide, 4,500 Japanese defenders behind concrete bunkers and palm log walls. The most heavily fortified position the United States Marines have ever assaulted. Turner's staff has spent 6 weeks planning the attack, 3 days of naval bombardment, then carrier strikes, then the landing. 12,000 Marines will cross the lagoon in Higgins boats and amphibious tractors. They will storm the beaches. They will take the island. Turner has promised his superiors that Tarawa will fall in 3 days. There is one problem nobody has solved: the reef. Betio sits behind a barrier reef. At high tide, the reef is submerged. Landing craft can pass over it. At low tide, the reef is exposed. Boats cannot cross. The Navy has tide tables, British colonial records, merchant ship logs, submarine reconnaissance. The tables predict 4.5 feet of water over the reef at 30 hours on November 20th. 4.5 feet is enough. The Higgins boats need 3 feet minimum. There will be clearance. Turner trusts the data. He has used tide tables for every operation in the Pacific. They have been reliable. On October 18th, a man walks into Turner's headquarters and asks to speak with someone planning the Tarawa invasion. His name is Frank Holland. He is 53 years old, gray hair, sun-weathered face, Australian accent. He works as a liaison officer for the Australian government. Before the war, he lived on Tarawa for 15 years. British colonial service, district officer. He knows Betio Island better than any man in the United States Navy. An aide brings Holland to the conference room. Turner is reviewing bombardment schedules with his gunnery officers. He looks up when Holland enters. Holland does not waste time with pleasantries. He says the tide tables are wrong. Turner asks what he means. Holland explains that Tarawa has unpredictable tides. The local Gilbertese Islanders call them dodging tides. They occur several times each year, usually in autumn. During a dodging tide, the water does not rise the way the tables predict. Water that should be 4 feet deep is 2 feet deep, sometimes 18 inches. Holland tells Turner that if a dodging tide occurs on November 20th, the Higgins boats will not reach the beach. They will ground out on the reef. The Marines will have to disembark and walk 700 yards in waist-deep water, under fire. Turner listens. His face does not change expression. He asks Holland how often these dodging tides occur. Holland says 3 or 4 times per year. He cannot predict exactly when. The phenomenon is not in any scientific literature. It is based on local observation. 15 years of watching tides from the beach. Turner asks his meteorological officer if the Navy has any data on dodging tides at Tarawa. The meteorological officer has never heard of the phenomenon. He has consulted with hydrographers at Pearl Harbor. They have no record of unpredictable tidal behavior in the Gilbert Islands. The tide tables are derived from lunar calculations and historical data. They are the best information available. Turner thanks Holland for the warning. He says the staff will take it under advisement. Holland does not leave immediately. He stands at the edge of the table and looks at the map of Betio. He asks Turner what will happen if the boats cannot reach the beach. Turner has an answer. The assault waves will use amphibious tractors, LVTs, landing vehicle tracked, armored tractors with treads. They can crawl over the reef regardless of water depth. The Marines used them at Guadalcanal. They worked. Holland asks how many tractors are available. Major General Julian Smith answers. Smith commands the 2nd Marine Division. He will lead the assault on Tarawa. He says the division has 75 tractors, enough for the first 3 waves. After that, the follow-on waves will come in Higgins boats. Holland looks at Turner. He says 75 tractors will not be enough if the tide is wrong. Turner says the tide will not be wrong. The Navy has confidence in the data. Holland asks one more question. He asks whether anyone has considered postponing the landing by 24 hours. If there is uncertainty about the tide on November 20th, the assault could be delayed until November 21st. Different tide cycle, less risk. Turner says postponement is not an option. The invasion fleet is already being assembled. The date has been coordinated with General MacArthur's operations in New Guinea and Admiral Halsey's operations in the Solomons. Changing the schedule would disrupt operations across the entire Pacific theater. The attack will proceed as planned. Holland does not argue. He is a civilian. He has delivered his warning. He is not making the decision. He leaves the headquarters building and walks back to his office. He does not attend any more planning meetings. Turner returns to his bombardment plan. One of his staff officers asks whether they should include Holland's warning in the operational briefing. Turner says no. The warning is based on unverifiable local folklore. It would undermine confidence in the landing plan. The Marines do not need to hear speculation about unpredictable tides. They need to focus on taking the beach. The officer makes a note in the operational log. 1 sentence. A civilian source reported the possibility of abnormal tidal conditions. The information was evaluated and determined insufficiently reliable to alter the operation. 3 weeks pass. The invasion fleet departs Pearl Harbor on November 13th. 18 transports, 17 destroyers, 3 battleships, 5 cruisers, 12,000 Marines, the ships steam west across the Pacific. The meteorological forecast for November 20th predicts calm seas and clear skies. High tide at 800 hours. Predicted water depth over the reef at 30 hours is 4 feet 6 inches. General Smith stands on the deck of the battleship Maryland and watches the fleet spread across the horizon. He has read the tide predictions. He has studied the reef charts. He has reviewed the landing plan dozens of times. Everything depends on 4 feet 6 inches of water. Smith does not know whether Frank Holland was correct. Nobody knows. The only way to find out is to send the boats toward the reef and watch what happens. On November 19th, the fleet arrives off Tarawa. The next morning, the bombardment begins. Battleships fire 16-inch shells into Bedio Island. Cruisers and destroyers add their guns. The island disappears under smoke and flame. Turner has promised that nothing will survive the bombardment. Not a cat, not a pillbox, not a machine gun. At 0600 hours on November 20th, the Marines climb down cargo nets into the landing craft. The first 3 waves board amphibious tractors. The tractors can cross the reef. The following waves board Higgins boats. The boats need water. At 0830 hours, the first wave starts toward the beach. The amphibious tractors crawl over the reef and reach shore. The second wave follows. The third wave, 75 tractors, 3 waves. Then the Higgins boats start their run. At 0847 hours, the first Higgins boat strikes the reef and stops. Then another, 40 boats, all stuck, 700 yards from the beach. The Marines look over the sides. They see water, 2 feet deep. They see the beach, 700 yards away. They see machine gun tracers. They hear their officers shouting. They understand what is about to happen. The ramps drop. The Marines step into the water. They start walking. Frank Holland is sitting in his office at Pearl Harbor when the first casualty reports arrive. November 20th, 1943. 0919 hours. USS Maryland, 4 miles off Bedio Island. General Julian Smith holds a yellow message form in his right hand. The paper is thin. Government issue. The handwriting is rushed. 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines. Red Beach 1. Heavy casualties on approach. Estimate 30% losses before reaching shore. Smith reads the message twice. 30% casualties before reaching shore. Not on the beach. Not storming bunkers. Before reaching shore. That means the boats did not make it. That means his Marines walked 700 yards through waist-deep water while Japanese machine guns fired into them. Admiral Turner stands beside him at the chart table. He reads over Smith's shoulder. Turner asks if there are reports from other battalions. A communications officer shuffles through a stack of message forms. 3rd Battalion reports moderate casualties. 1st Battalion reports heavy resistance, but no specific numbers. The messages are fragmentary. Radio transmissions from the beach are disrupted by Japanese fire. Smith asks Turner directly. Did the Higgins boats reach the beach? Turner does not answer immediately. He calls for the beachmaster, the officer responsible for controlling landing craft flow. The beachmaster arrives. His uniform is dry. He has been coordinating from the ship. Turner asks whether the boats crossed the reef successfully. The beachmaster says most boats grounded approximately 700 yards from shore. Crews attempted to reverse and find deeper channels. Some succeeded. Most did not. Marines disembarked and proceeded on foot. Smith asks how many boats grounded. The beachmaster estimates 40, possibly more. He cannot confirm exact numbers. The situation is confused. Turner looks at the tide chart mounted on the bulkhead. The chart shows 4 feet 6 inches of water over the reef at 0830 hours. gradually decreasing through the morning. Current predicted depth is 4 feet 2 inches. Still adequate. Smith says the coxswains reported 2 feet of water. Turner says the coxswains may be mistaken. Visibility is poor. Smoke from the bombardment obscures depth perception. Coral reefs create optical illusions. The tide tables are based on verified data. Smith does not argue. Turner is a Navy admiral. Smith is a Marine general. Tides are Navy jurisdiction. Smith is responsible for fighting on the beach. Turner is responsible for getting Marines to the beach. If Turner says the tables are correct, Smith has no technical basis to disagree. At 09:35 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Amy sends a message from his approaching battalion. Request clarification on water depth over reef. Reports from shore indicate insufficient depth for landing craft. Turner confers with his operations officer. The operations officer suggests the shallow water may be localized. The reef is irregular. Some sections may have insufficient depth, while others provide adequate clearance. Amy should proceed and assess conditions on site. Turner drafts a reply. Proceed as planned. Water depth should be adequate. If boats cannot cross, disembark troops and advance on foot. Naval gunfire will provide covering fire. The message transmits at 09:38 hours. Amy's battalion continues toward the reef. At 10:15 hours, Colonel David Shoup sends the first comprehensive situation report from Betio. Shoup is the senior Marine ashore. He reports 5,000 Marines on the island. Casualties estimated at 20%. Most casualties occurred during approach from reef. Japanese positions remain operational. Naval bombardment did not neutralize defenses. American forces hold a beachhead 50 yards deep. Ammunition running low. Wounded accumulating at aid stations. Cannot evacuate due to insufficient boats. Shoup ends with a question. Were the tide predictions accurate? Water depth over reef appears significantly less than forecast. Will conditions improve with afternoon high tide? Need alternative plans if not? Smith looks at Turner. Turner examines the tide chart. Afternoon high tide predicted for 2100 hours, 9 hours away. Predicted depth 5 feet 3 inches, more than adequate. Turner tells Smith the afternoon tide will solve the problem. By evening, Higgins' boats will cross freely. Current difficulties are temporary. Smith drafts a response. Hold positions. Afternoon high tide will improve beach access. Reinforcements and resupply after tidal conditions improve. The message transmits at 10:27 hours. On Betio, Shoup reads it and calculates. 8.5 hours until high tide. He inventories remaining ammunition. He counts wounded waiting for evacuation. He looks at the water covering the reef. 2 feet, maybe less. He does not understand how 2 feet becomes 5 feet in 8 hours. But he is not a hydrographer. He follows orders. At 1104 hours, Amy's battalion reaches the reef. 42 Higgins boats, 1,500 Marines. The lead boat strikes coral and stops. Then another. Then all 42 boats sit motionless on the reef, engines churning uselessly. Amy stands in the first boat. He is 31 years old, graduate of the Naval Academy, company commander at Guadalcanal, battalion commander for 3 months. He looks toward the beach, 700 yards. He sees Marines moving along the shoreline. He sees bunkers. He sees muzzle flashes. He sees bodies floating in the shallows. Amy orders his men to disembark. 1,500 Marines climb over the gunwales and drop into the lagoon. The water is warm. Bath temperature. It reaches their waists. Some men are shorter. The water reaches their chests. They hold rifles overhead to keep actions dry. They begin walking. Japanese gunners have been watching the boats approach. They waited. When the Marines enter the water, the guns open fire, methodical fire, sustained bursts. The gunners have had 20 minutes to range their weapons. Every gun on the western beach has been zeroed on the reef. The Marines cannot run. Water resists movement. They cannot dive for cover. There is no cover. They can only walk forward. Some men try to zigzag. The water slows them too much. Walking straight is faster. Amy is hit 30 seconds after leaving the boat. He does not hear the gun that kills him. The bullets arrive faster than sound. 3 rounds strike his chest in a tight group. Amy falls face forward into the water. His body floats. His pack keeps him buoyant. The Marines behind him step around his body and continue walking. They do not stop. Stopping means dying. A corporal reaches down and takes Amy's map case. The maps are waterproof. The corporal keeps walking. He will give the maps to whoever is in command when he reaches shore. If he reaches shore. The walk takes 12 minutes. For some men, it takes longer. For some, it ends in the water. 350 Marines from Amy's battalion do not reach the beach. Their bodies drift in the lagoon. Some sink, some float, some wash ashore later with the actual tide. On the Maryland, Smith receives the first report from Amy's battalion at 11:47 hours. Heavy casualties during reef crossing. Battalion commander killed. Executive officer assuming command. Troops reaching beach in small groups, attempting to consolidate. Smith reads the message. He sets it on the chart table. He picks up a grease pencil. He draws a red X on the map where Amy's battalion landed. He writes a number beside the X. 350. He does not say anything. Turner reads the message over his shoulder. Turner also does not say anything. At 11:53 hours, a messenger delivers a folder to Turner. The folder is marked routine, not urgent, not priority, routine. Turner opens it. Inside is a meteorological report from the ship's weather officer. The report states that barometric pressure has been falling since 0600 hours. Current atmospheric conditions do not favor normal tidal rise. Revised prediction for afternoon high tide is 3 feet 8 inches over the reef, not 5 feet 3 inches. Turner reads the report twice. He asks why this information was not provided earlier. The messenger says the weather officer noticed the barometric trend at 1100 hours. The analysis took 45 minutes. The report was filed at 11:45 hours. It was marked routine because it is a meteorological update. Routine category. Standard procedure. Turner asks if 3 feet 8 inches is sufficient for Higgins boats. The messenger does not know. He is a communications technician, not a naval architect. Smith is standing beside Turner. He reads the meteorological report. He asks what this means for afternoon resupply. Turner says resupply will face challenges. Some boats may cross, some may ground. The amphibious tractors can handle critical supplies. Smith asks how many boats will cross successfully. Turner says he cannot predict. It depends on specific draft and reef contours. Smith asks if Turner can guarantee resupply to 5,000 Marines. Turner says guarantee is not the correct term. Resupply will proceed. Challenges are manageable. Smith looks at Turner for 3 seconds without speaking. Then he picks up the grease pencil again. He writes on the chart. Total casualties 1,200 hours, 1,200. Turner watches Smith write the number. He says casualties are regrettable, but within expected parameters for opposed assault against fortified position. Operation proceeding according to plan. By evening, sustainable beachhead will be secured. Smith sets down the pencil. He asks Turner a direct question. Do you believe the afternoon tide will rise to 3 feet 8 inches? Or do you believe it will remain at 2 feet? Turner does not answer immediately. He looks at the meteorological report. He looks at the tide chart. He says the meteorological report is a revised estimate based on current conditions. Conditions may change. The afternoon tide may exceed the revised estimate. Smith asks what happens if the tide does not rise. Turner says the tractors will maintain logistics flow. The situation is not ideal, but it is manageable. At 12:30 hours, the 8th Marines receive orders to land. 3,000 men, fresh troops. They will reinforce the beachhead. They will push inland. They will break Japanese resistance. The 8th Marines climb into Higgins' boats. Every man knows what happened to earlier waves. The word has spread through the transport ships. Reef too shallow. Men walking. Men dying in the water. Smith stands on the flag bridge and watches the boats form up. 48 Higgins boats in neat lines, heading toward the reef. He knows the tide has not risen. The meteorological report confirmed what the coxswains reported 6 hours ago. 2 feet of water, maybe less. Smith could order the boats to wait. He could delay the landing until evening. He could verify actual tidal conditions before committing more men. But delaying means the 5,000 Marines already ashore fight without reinforcement for 8 more hours. Delaying means the beachhead may collapse. Delaying means the operation fails. Smith makes his decision. He does not countermand the landing order. The boats continue toward the reef. At 1300 hours, the first boat of the 8th Marines strikes coral and stops. Then another. Then all 48 boats sit motionless 700 yards from shore. 3,000 Marines look over the sides at 2 feet of water. The ramps drop. The men step into the lagoon and begin walking toward the beach. November 20th, 1943. 2100 hours. High tide. The tide charts predicted 5 feet 3 inches of water over the reef at Batio. The meteorological officer revised his estimate to 3 feet 8 inches at noon. At 2100 hours, a coxswain measures the actual depth using a weighted line. 2 feet 4 inches. The water never rose. By midnight, American forces control a beachhead 300 yards deep and half a mile wide. 12,000 Marines are ashore. They hold their positions through the night. Japanese counterattacks fail. By dawn on November 21st, the outcome is no longer in doubt. The Marines will take the island. It is only a question of time and additional casualties. The battle ends on November 23rd, 76 hours after the first wave landed. 4,500 Japanese defenders are dead. 17 are captured. The rest chose death over surrender. American casualties total 1,696 killed, 2,188 wounded. Total casualties 3,884. 32% of the assault force. The highest casualty rate of any amphibious operation in United States Marine Corps history to that date. Of the 1,696 Americans killed at Tarawa, military analysts later estimate that approximately 600 died during the approach from the reef to the beach. They did not die storming fortified positions. They did not die in close combat. They died walking through shallow water because the tide predictions were wrong. 600 men, walking 700 yards, 2 feet of water, 12 minutes. For some, it took longer. For some, it ended in the lagoon. On November 24th, Admiral Turner and General Smith tour the captured island. They walk along Red Beach 2, where the 2nd Marines landed. The beach is covered with debris, wrecked landing craft, destroyed amphibious tractors, equipment. The bodies have been collected, but the blood remains. Dark stains on coral sand. The smell is overwhelming. Death and fuel and seawater. Turner does not comment on the reef. Smith does not ask about the tide predictions. They inspect defensive positions. They examine Japanese bunkers. They discuss lessons learned about naval gunfire effectiveness and the necessity of longer pre-invasion bombardment. They walk past the spot where the Higgins boats grounded 700 yards offshore. Neither man mentions Frank Holland's warning. They do not discuss what might have been prevented. The official after-action report is filed in December 1943. The report analyzes the operation in detail: amphibious doctrine, landing craft performance, naval gunfire procedures, air support coordination. The report includes a section on tidal conditions. The section states that water depth over the reef was less than predicted due to unexpected meteorological conditions. The report recommends improved tide prediction methods for future operations. The report does not mention that a civilian warned commanders about unpredictable tides 6 weeks before the assault. The warning exists in one sentence in the operational log. A civilian source reported possible abnormal tidal conditions, information evaluated and deemed unreliable. Frank Holland remains at Pearl Harbor through 1944. He continues working as a liaison officer. He does not write about Tarawa. He does not give interviews. He does not say, "I told you so." In 1945, he returns to Australia. He resumes civilian life. He never speaks publicly about his warning, not to reporters, not to historians, not to his family. He dies in 1962. Whatever he thought about the 600 men who walked across the reef, he knew better than any admiral. He kept to himself. Admiral Turner continues commanding amphibious operations throughout the Pacific War. He plans and executes the invasions of the Marshall Islands, the Marianas, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. He applies lessons from Tarawa: longer bombardments, more amphibious tractors, better reconnaissance. The procedures work. At Saipan and Iwo Jima, Marines do not walk across reefs under fire. The lessons purchased at Tarawa save thousands of lives in subsequent operations. Turner retires in 1947 as a full admiral. He dies in 1961. His memoirs do not mention Frank Holland. General Smith commands the 2nd Marine Division through the invasion of Saipan in 1944. He receives the Distinguished Service Medal for his leadership at Tarawa. He retires in 1946 as a lieutenant general. He dies in 1975. He never publicly discusses the civilian who predicted the tide failure 6 weeks before the operation. The families of the Marines killed at Tarawa receive telegrams. "We regret to inform you, killed in action, in the performance of his duty." The telegrams do not specify how their sons and husbands died. The telegrams do not explain the circumstances. The telegrams do not say your son drowned in 2 feet of water 700 yards from the beach, because the Navy trusted a chart more than a man who lived on the island for 15 years. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Amy's wife receives her telegram in California. She is 28 years old. She has a 3-year-old daughter. The telegram says her husband was killed in action on Betio Island. The telegram does not say he died 30 seconds after stepping off his landing craft. It does not say he fell face forward into warm, shallow water, while 1,500 of his men walked past his floating body toward a beach he could see but would never reach. She keeps the telegram in a drawer for the rest of her life. When people ask how her husband died, she says he was killed at Tarawa. She does not know about Frank Holland. She does not know about the warning. She does not know that her husband might have landed on the beach instead of 700 yards from it if an admiral had believed a civilian who knew the tides. In 1984, 41 years after the battle, a military historical study is declassified. Researchers discover the operational log entry about Holland's warning. They discover that commanders were informed that tide tables might be unreliable. They discover that the warning was dismissed. By 1984, everyone who made the decision is dead. Turner, Smith, Holland. Most of the Marines who walked across the reef are grandfathers now. Some of them read about Holland's warning in histories, written 4 decades after they waded through the lagoon watching their friends fall. Some of them wonder whether the man next to them would have survived if an admiral had postponed the landing by 24 hours. They do not have an answer. Nobody does. On Betio Island, a memorial stands near Red Beach 2. 1,696 names carved in stone. No distinction between men killed on the beach and men killed in the water. No notation indicating which deaths resulted from enemy action and which resulted from a decision made in a conference room at Pearl Harbor 6 weeks earlier. November 20th, 1943, was the last day 1,696 Americans were alive. For 600 of them, it was the day they died walking through water that was never supposed to be there. Water that a man named Frank Holland said would be there. Water that admirals said would not be there. The water was there.